I pitched my little dome tent where my parents' lawn frayed into woods, at the exact seam where sprinklers stopped and wild things started. The grass there had always been a green ribbon of truce between our house and the forest, mowed, safe, knowable. Beyond it, the trees gathered like strangers at a bus stop after midnight, each with their own posture and private stories. It was June 2019, a muggy evening with crickets, sawing their tired chorus, and I wanted to prove something to myself I couldn't quite name. Maybe that I could sleep where the porch light didn't reach. Maybe that 28 wasn't too old to chase the corners of my childhood, to pitch a tent 10 minutes from a refrigerator and call it camping. Dad had rolled his eyes with a smile. "You know, there are bears out there," he'd said, pointing with his beard toward the tree line. "Black bears don't want anything to do with me." I told him, pretending I had real experience. Mom packed me a cooler anyway. Bottled water, leftover pasta in a plastic tub, and the marshmallows she always bought for the grandkids, even though there weren't any yet. I hugged her and told her I'd be fine. The lie was easy. I believed it. By twilight, the tent was up, a ridiculous khaki bubble against the dark. I built a neat fire inside a ring of stones that's been there since I was a kid. How many summer nights have we spent here? Sticky with bug spray and mosquito bitten. Listening to Dad tell us how the woods used to be thicker, the creek wider, the night starrier. When the first flames found their voice, I felt a click inside my chest, the click of a door closing behind you. I was committed now. No house, no phone scrolling, just a sigh of pines and the quiet, endless breath of the woods. I roasted a couple marshmallows into blistered moons and ate them too fast, burning my tongue. The sweetness was stupidly comforting. It made me feel safe enough to say out loud what I'd been thinking since I spread the tent fly. I'm going up to the tower tomorrow. The lookout tower stood a few miles into the state forest that bordered our property, a rusting set of stilts with a glass shack at the top, long decommissioned, the kind of thing kids dare each other to climb. In high school, rumors covered it like ivy. A ranger who fell in a storm and haunted the stairwell, a lightning strike that welded a hiker to the railing, squatters who lit candles up there and painted eyes on the windows. None of it was true, of course, except the part about being condemned. Last year, the county had nailed a sign into the first step, unsafe structure, do not enter, which made it irresistible. I told myself I'd just hike to it, get close enough to smell the old cedar of the trestles, the hot iron tang of rust, maybe snap a photo. I hadn't been out there since college, and back then the tower had seemed like proof of something, that adults built tall things to see farther, that there was a higher perch from which the world looked less chaotic. Lately, I've forgotten that feeling. Lately, everything felt ground level and stupidly loud. I kicked the fire, sending up a hail of sparks. The woods took the sparks back in silence. The night sank in the slow way it does in June, trading gold for bone blue. I zipped the tent flap and lay there listening to the trees talk to each other. At some point I must have slept, because I dreamed the tower was a backbone, and I was a fish climbing it, wriggling up rung by rung until I flopped into a glass skull where eyes watched from every corner. When I woke before dawn, sweat salted and annoyed at my own subconscious, the dream slid away like minnows. The morning was soft and gray. Fog hung low over the creek like a dragged blanket. I brewed camp coffee that tasted like wet coins and ate cold pasta straight from the tub, shivering in my sweatshirt while the insects warmed up their instruments. A pair of crows heckled me from the maple tree. "I'm going," I told them. "You can have my marshmallows if I'm not back by noon." The trail isn't really a trail so much as a rumor of one. A corridor of flattened ferns that remembers your feet from the last time. I stepped over the fallen gate in the old barbed wire fence, careful where the wires still arc like dead snakes, and pushed into the woods proper. The air changed immediately, cooler, wetter, and tinctured with tannin, like an old library steeped in leaf and soil. The path rose and fell, but mostly it rose. The ground was a tangle of roots like tendons, slick with moss. The brambles reached and snagged at my jeans in a way that felt half accidental, half personal. I tried to keep to a rhythm, counting steps, counting breaths, the way I used to on long runs. Every now and then I'd find trail marker nailed crooked to a trunk, the paint scab away, but the color still visible under the weather. A faded blaze of orange pointed me home. The forest is stingy, with its landmarks. Everything repeats: tree, tree, rock, dip, tree, and you start to understand why people walk in circles. I kept my phone in my pocket, resisting the urge to check the little blue dot. It felt important to earn it this time, to find the tower by memory and stubbornness. After an hour, or maybe two, I stopped looking at my watch. I reached a place where the undergrowth thinned, and the trees gave way to scrub and rock, a natural bald. The tower rose beyond it, thin as a hand-drawn figure, its angles wrong against the roundness of hills. Even from a distance, it looked tired. The stair stringers bowed with age, the metal braces wept rust, and the glass in the cab at the top was a mosaic of empties and spider-cracked panes that threw back a confused reflection of the day. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, standing there, I felt the first small, cool hand of unease touch the back of my neck. It wasn't anything specific. The wind was steady, the birds busy, the late morning sun trying to push through the haze. But the clearing was wrong in some way that made my mouth go dry. The grass was shorter than it should have been, cropped down close, as if someone had been grazing there that didn't care for clover. And there were marks I remember from years ago, small piles of stones at the clearing's edge, 3 in a row, as neat as teeth. The metal of the lowest stairs gave a soft, hollow groan in the wind, just the building settling into its decline. That's what I told myself. I took a step closer, and another. That was when I heard the first sound that didn't belong to wind or bird or bug. The crisp, unmistakable click of something metal knocking lightly against metal, like a carabiner brushing a railing. It came from above. I lifted my eyes to the cab, to the dark rectangles of its windows. There, behind the broken glass, someone was standing very still and watching me. At first, I thought the figure in the cab might be a trick of reflection, my own outline caught and multiplied in broken panes. But reflections move with you. This one didn't. It stood too still, a seam of darkness with a suggestion of a head and shoulders, as if someone had been cut out of daylight and pinned there to dry. I raised a hand and waved without meaning to, that awkward reflex of sidewalks and living rooms, and the shape did nothing. No return wave, no shift of weight, just the wind lifting the edges of torn caution tape, where it had been knotted to the railing, the tape snapping like a tongue. "Hello." My voice went up into the latticework and came back thinner. I cleared my throat. "You okay up there?" Silence. Then the soft clack again, something tapping against metal, not quite regular, like breathing remembered by fingers. I told myself it was probably a teenager. The county had closed the tower, sure, but kids treated rules like invitations. Maybe they were high. Maybe they were recording a video. Maybe they were a squatter who didn't want to be seen. Possibilities lined up like excuses, each one making the next step seem reasonable. The sign at the base was newer than I remembered, its red letters still fat with paint. Unsafe structure. Keep out. Someone had spray painted below it in the same shade of red. Keep in, just slanted enough to feel like a dare. The first stair yawned up from the ground like a tongue to tooth to throat. I put my foot on it and felt it would flex, old pine bones complaining in a low voice. "I'm just going to first landing." I told no one. Told myself. Just to see. The climb rearranged sound. I left the hiss of grass and found the tower's particular listening, the way its joints held their own weather. With every step the riser spoke in a vocabulary of groans and dry squeaks, answering each other, translating my weight. I counted without deciding to 1, 2, 3. How many planks between landings? By 7 the ground had already changed its mind about keeping me, and the clearing below looked like an idea someone had had about a meadow rather than the thing itself. At 12 I noticed the marks. They weren't numbers, not at first. More like tallies carved into the inside of the stringer, down where the shadow gathered. A hatch mark language etched with something sharp and patient. 5 lines, then 5 more, then a space, then 4, as if someone had been counting days, or visitors, or breath. On the next step the same, except one of the lines was deeper, angrier, a scratch into the scratch. They continued up, step after step, a thin ladder of someone else's time. "Hello." I tried again, because it felt worse not to. The silhouette in the cab didn't answer. If anything, the stillness felt more deliberate. It isn't just looking, I thought. It's choosing. Halfway to the first landing, the wind shifted, and I smelled something that didn't belong to rust or old wood, tallow and smoke, the rind of a burned candle. On instinct, I paused and scanned the undercarriage. There, fixed to one of the diagonal braces by a twist of baling wire, hung a bundle of things tied together with red thread. Bird bones light as sentences, a lock of hair too clean and blonde to be from a deer, 3 buttons of different sizes, and a key whose head had been filed into a crude eye. The red thread had bled into the wood, making a pink tear that ran down toward the ground. I didn't need legends to tell me charms when I saw them. Whatever this was, it wasn't a ranger's leftover kit. The landing came with mercy. Wider planks, a place to put both feet and think. The clearing below looked smaller, the piles of stones like punctuation marks from a book I hadn't learned to read. From up here, I could see there were more of them, tucked into the scrub along the tree-line in little constellations. Not random, arranged. It made the short hair on my arms lift and made me wish I had paid attention to which way the path knifed back into the trees. I peered up. The second flight rose at a sharper tilt, the kind that made your knees whisper. Beyond it, another landing, and beyond that the cab, a shoebox of window squares, one pane so fractured it threw sunlight like water. Behind that broken pane, the figure remained. For one strange second I had the sensation that if I kept standing here, if I kept looking up, the figure would stretch long enough to reach me without moving at all. "I'm coming up," I said. "If you need help, I can help." The tower answered with a tremor I felt through my palms on the rail. Not movement from above, from inside the step I occupied, as if something living in the wood had turned over. It was subtle enough I could have blamed my pulse, except the sound came with it. That clack, closer now, not metal on metal but tooth on tooth, the little knock of a jaw settling. I started up the next run, because down felt farther. My feet found cadence. My breath made a volume I didn't want. The tallies continued. Thicker here, layered over older scratches. At the second landing I found more offerings. A cluster of candle stubs arranged in a rough circle around a copper penny polish with someone's thumb. A tiny jar with something murky inside, and a label dissolved by weather, the letters M.A. still readable. A child's shoelace, looped and knotted in a way that suggested intent rather than loss. I stepped over them like a boarder. The third flight was worse. The risers had cupped from years of rain and boots, and my toes found the cups too well. The railing, galvanized once, now gritted with orange scab, stung my palm. Above, the cab door swam into clearer shape. A rectangle of plywood hung crooked on one hinge. The padlock sheared off and left like a metal tear at the hasp. The silhouette shifted then, not forward or back, but sideways, a slow slide that made my stomach lean. It was not a trick of shadow. It was someone. "Hey!" I said, more sharply than I meant. "I can see you." The thing didn't answer. Instead, something else did. The steps above me answered my words with their old wood sigh, as if they were learning my voice. And then, faint but real, the sound of footfall that wasn't mine, one pace above and slightly to the left, as though someone waited with a patient ear and matched me, but wrong, half a beat late. I froze, and the tower, grateful for the courtesy, stilled around me. My breath made a small storm in my chest. I waited for the answering footstep that silence sometimes makes, the phantom echo. It didn't come. A little laughter tickled the back of my skull then, childish, but not a child, because I realized how stupidly staged it all was. The lonely tower, the carved tallies, the tidy charms, the watcher. If I had read it in a story, I would have rolled my eyes at the protagonist and wanted to shake them. And yet there I stood, shaking anyway, because when you are the person in the scene, your body doesn't read. It translates. "Okay," I said to myself, to the tower, to the thing that matched my steps. "Okay, I'm going to the top. I'm going to see what this is." The last flight tilted not up, but toward, as if the tower wanted to introduce me to its face. My knees ached. Some part of the wood had taken my sweat into itself and kept it for later. The clacking sound returned, now unquestionably close, as if a string of teeth had been threaded and swung. Tap, tap, tap against the rail. When I reached up for the final landing, My fingers closed around something sticky that pulled like sap. I glanced down expecting amber and found instead a smear the color of rust, but too fresh, too bright, with a smell beneath iron, fat, and candle. The door to the cab moved a quarter inch on its bad hinge. Not pushed, not pulled, as if the tower itself were breathing and I had arrived at the mouth. The cab door shivered on its hinge, an almost polite invitation. I pushed it open with 2 fingers, expecting resistance, but it swung too easily, the sound of its creak slipping into my chest like a cold key. The inside smelled of mildew and wax. The air was warmer than outside, as though the little glass box had been bottling something alive. Dust motes jittered in the shaft of light that broke through fractured panes, and the floor was littered with more offerings. Matchbooks half-burned, cigarette butt arranged in spirals, a toy soldier missing its head, and on the far wall, in chalk the color of bone, a circle drawn wide with symbols that looked like letters but weren't any language I knew. And he was there, at the opposite end of the cab, framed by broken glass, stood the figure I had seen from below. A man, though the word felt too round for him. He was thin as fence wire, his skin gray-white and stretched like damp paper. His eyes were open but filmed, as though cataracts had polished them into mirrors. He didn't move as I entered, didn't even blink, but his head was angled just slightly off-center, a tilt of interest that made my scalp prickle. "Hey," I whispered. I don't know why. My throat felt dry and young. The man didn't speak. He breathed, though shallow, rattling, like a drawer opening and closing. His chest rose and fell as if reluctant, and his hand, long, bone-wan fingers, tapped at the railing behind him in the same clacking rhythm I'd heard below. Tap, 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 a rhythm like counting backward. I told myself he was just some squatter, maybe a drifter who'd taken to living in the tower. But squatters had sleeping bags, cigarette packs, backpacks, trash. This man had none of that, just a circled chalk behind him, the stubs of candlelight, and the marks on the stairs leading up to him. My voice cracked and steadied. I'm just going to look around. I'll leave in a minute. His lips stretched, not in a smile, but in something that exposed teeth, longer than they should have been, yellow as candle ends. The tapping hand stopped. The air seemed to thicken, and though I swear he hadn't moved, suddenly the man was closer, not by steps, but by some shrinking of the room itself. I backed against the doorframe. The tower groaned, as though my weight as together exceeded its memory. The piles of stones in the clearing below seemed suddenly too precise, like they were waiting for something to fall. The man inhaled, a ragged sound, and whispered in a voice made of splinters. Keep in. I bolted. The stairs were worse going down. They seemed longer, more numerous. My boots slapped with that buckled-in complaint. I counted without meaning to, and the numbers didn't match the ones I counted going up. I climbed maybe 40 steps total. Now there were more. 70? 80? Each landing felt farther apart, stretched like taffy. Behind me came the clacking, not of his fingers this time, but of steps. Too close, too fast. The rhythm wrong, like someone learning how to walk for the first time. Get out, I muttered. Get out, get out, get out. The tally marks blurred the edge of my vision as I flew past them. Notchwood became teeth. The charms that had seemed odd but harmless now swung in some unfelt wind, rattling like bones in a cup. At the second landing, I caught sight of the jar with the letters M.A. and saw, clear in the murk, a finger curled inside, nail intact. The stairs warped. Twice I felt it would dip, as though something heavy had stepped on it just behind me. My body knew I couldn't turn, couldn't look, or the weight would belong to me. When the clearing finally broke open below, relief poured through me like a second skeleton. I leapt the last 4 steps and hit the ground in a stagger. The grass felt wrong under my feet, short, wet, almost like hair, but I didn't stop. The piles of stones now glowed faintly, as if lit from inside. Each one pulsed with rhythm I recognized too late. The same beat as the tapping, the same as the whisper. Keep in. Something about the placement struck me, not random. They formed a circle, and the tower stood at the circle's heart. I realized then that the structure wasn't keeping people out. It was keeping something in. I ran. The path should have been easy to find. It was a corridor I'd just come through, but now the trees leaned together, their arms bent into an arch that wasn't familiar. The orange trail markers were gone. No blaze, no paint, just bark. I picked a direction and sprinted, branches tearing at my sleeves. Every sound followed, the tap, 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 the low groan of timber, and beneath it all, that shallow breathing. Sometimes it was behind me, sometimes beside me, once even in front of me. The woods rearranged themselves to carry it. I tripped, hit my knees hard, and when I looked up, the path opened into another clearing. My stomach dropped. It was the same clearing. The same tower rose above me, the same stone teeth at its edges. I'd run in a circle. The door to the cab now stood wide. From this distance, I could see the man still standing inside, waiting, head tilted. His teeth gleamed. I backed away, shaking. My lungs burned. "No!" I whispered. "No, no, no!" But the woods didn't care what I wanted. They closed in again, shuffling me toward the circle. I don't know where the clarity came from, fear or instinct, but suddenly I understood. The stones, they were the boundary. The circle wasn't to keep me out. It was to keep him in. And by stepping inside, by entering the tower, I had broken something old. The piles pulsed again. With every beat, the man's shape seemed less tethered to the tower. His form bled into the air like ink and water. I kicked one of the stone piles. Hard. The stacks scattered, clattering across the dirt. A scream ripped through the clearing. Not from the tower, not from my throat, but from everywhere at once. High, raw, furious. The man staggered at the window. His mirror eyes clouded darker. His teeth snapped shut like a trap. I ran to the next pile and booted it apart. Another scream, another shudder. The air lightened just slightly. Something huge and invisible slammed against my back, throwing me into the dirt. Fingers, too many fingers, dragged across my neck. The smell of candle fat filled my mouth. I clawed forward, found the third pile, and knocked it down with both hands. The clearing went still. The tower sagged, its top cab splitting with a crack. The man shrieked once more, then collapsed inward, folding like paper into the dark. His form shattered into ash that spun upward, swallowed by the sun, and the stone stopped glowing. I crawled away until my hands found the familiar texture of real earth, damp, messy, unpatterned. When I looked back, the tower still stood, but it was smaller, broken, like a photograph curling in fire. The circle was gone. The air smelled clean again. I staggered through the woods, this time finding the trail without trouble. The orange blazes returned, sharp and fresh. The path unknotted itself, leading me back to the fence and the safety of grass. By the time I stumbled into my parents' yard, the sun was low, and the house looked impossibly normal. My dad's voice carried from the porch, called my name like it always did. Mom waved from the kitchen window, her hands dusted in flour. But behind me, deep in the trees, the sound followed one last time. Tap, tap, tap. A promise.